Okay, so we're now moving to our final session. The Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, is going to join us. I have to say it gives me a great pleasure to introduce the Minister. She has been a real trailblazer in all the ministerial positions that she's had to date, and we've been fortunate enough to work with her when she was a junior minister on mental health, and she led the Youth Mental Health Task Force. She then, when she was junior minister for European Affairs, played a pivotal role in Brexit negotiations, and it's probably one of the high points where Ireland really delivered was around Brexit and protecting the rights of people on the island of Ireland. And as Minister for Justice, she has played a critical role in some of the key issues, and certainly something that I've been very personally affected by as a campaigner, the situation of undocumented children, and we've had our first formal scheme under the Minister's leadership. But crucially, she's also delivered in relation to domestic violence. There's a new domestic violence strategy and new funding. So it gives me a great honour and pleasure to introduce the Minister, and thank you so much, Minister, for closing our event here today.
Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. You'll have to I'm going to have to apologise. I should probably be standing up there, but the joys of being pregnant, dizzy spells and wobbly legs can hit you at any moment. So rather than me hit the deck, I thought it would be better to talk to you from the chair here. But look, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and really am delighted that I can join you. And I hope, and I know, I suppose, having spoken to my colleagues throughout the day, that you've had a very productive day. It's such an important conference, particularly when we're talking about the rights and determination of the best interests of the child, when we're focusing on parental separation and care proceedings. And it is always the case that the best interests of the child, the welfare of our children, should be paramount in absolutely any considerations that we're making when decisions are being made that directly impact and directly affect the life of the child, particularly when it comes to family law or childcare proceedings. Not only should the views of the child be heard, but they should be taken into account. So we must always ensure that we're not just hearing them, but that we are listening, that we are reflecting, and that we are feeding that into any policies or laws or anything that we are doing. So it's my great pleasure to give the closing address for today's event. This is obviously part of Ireland's wider programme of work as chairholder of the Committee of Ministers, something that is coming to a close now, having held this position for the last 6 months. The Council of Europe has long promoted the rights of the child, making sure that we pioneer various different vital training programmes, inclusion programmes right across the continent. And I maybe just want to take this opportunity to pay tribute and acknowledge the hard work that has gone on. We hosted 45 member states on Friday at a domestic violence seminar, and reflected on the fact that Michael D. Higgins, our president, referred to the Council of Europe as the conscience of Europe. And I think it very clearly sets out an obligation that we have to make sure that we do everything in our power to protect and to uphold the human rights of those who are most vulnerable, and we would include children in that. I want to thank you, obviously, as chair of the Children's Rights Alliance, not just for your work and continuous efforts in so many different fields, much of which you've outlined, but also for emceeing today's event. We're very, very lucky to have you here, but also to all of the speakers, to all of the participants who have contributed so willingly their knowledge, their expertise, their understanding of the family law system, but from a wide range of different viewpoints as well, which I think is really, really important. I was particularly pleased to see, firstly, a session of the programme which focused on international experiences of incorporating children's views when we're developing future standards in family proceedings. Also, the previous session, which I've just heard some of, which was chaired by Niall Muldoon, our Ombudsman, I think was extremely enlightening, and I was pleased to see this in the previous one, particularly because both issues are so central to what we are doing in the Department of Justice, focusing on child-centred family law reform, and this is something that I'll discuss maybe in a bit more detail in a few moments. Our second presidency of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe has been driven, I think, by an abiding belief in the power of deliberative democracy, and indeed the necessity of youth participation, as evidenced by today's proceedings. We have an absolutely vital role in ensuring that children participate, that young people participate, that they stand up for their own rights, and that they get involved involved in the processes of society. And I can say, as a public representative, as someone who travels to schools, who engages with children in my own constituency and outside of it, I can see how much more involved younger people are, be it in competitions, be it in raising awareness around issues that impact them, but also that impact their communities as well. So it's so important that we continue to encourage that type of engagement, because that is how we better shape the policies of the future. It's how we have a better, a safer environment for young people, and that we make sure that their interest is at the core of everything that we do. As Minister for Justice, I know the absolutely vital role that legislation, ensuring that it's robust and fair, the important role that it plays in our society at a most fundamental level. It's about providing guidance, it's about consistency and accountability, but above all, it is about protecting those who are most in need. And as our most vulnerable citizens, children need strong legislation. They need it to protect them, but to ensure that their rights are upheld and that they are prioritised. And so as society changes and evolves, it's so important that our laws, particularly those who are protecting our most vulnerable, that they evolve and change, and that our policies to support and to complement those laws, that they evolve as well. And that is why I'm working with so many in my department, Una Buckley, who's here, and others. We are so determined to change and to overhaul the family justice system, and to make sure that it is more efficient, that it is more effective, that it is more user-friendly, that it is more family-friendly, and that it puts the child front and centre in every single element of its work. And it is a key commitment in the programme for government, but also in my own family justice strategy from last year, 2021, feeding into 22, and will be a core element of our justice plan for 2023. The commitment in the family justice, or in the programme for government, is to enact a family court bill. So this will create a dedicated family court within the existing structure. It will provide for court proceedings, again, as I've said, that provide for a faster and a less adversarial process. So where possible, encouraging mediation to actually take it out of the courts, to try and remove what can often lead to an even more difficult process once it gets into the courts. It is a priority for government. It will establish the family courts division within the existing court structure. So you will have a dedicated family high court, a dedicated family circuit court, a dedicated family district court, so that each family law matter will be dealt with as appropriate within the various different jurisdictions. The judges of the family court themselves will be appointed with the aim of having judges with a particular interest and suitability in actually determining family law proceedings with such cases on an ongoing basis. So we want people who want to be there, who want to deal with family law cases, who want to continuously educate themselves, who want to ensure that they are doing the best that they can do specific to family law, because I know it can be a challenge for our judges at the moment, dealing with criminal matters, dealing with family law, dealing with minor cases, and having to juggle all of that. So we want people whose sole focus will be dealing with family law, and I know that there are many, many judges that will be putting their hands up and that will hopefully be dealing with these. And it's about having specialist knowledge, it's about having that understanding and training, and it will be required for each judge as time progresses. There will be a set of guiding principles to help ensure that the family court system operates in that efficient and that user-friendly manner, encouraging active case management by the courts, making sure, again, the best interest of the child is the primary consideration in all family law proceedings. The principles will also give clear recognition to the need to ensure that the views of the child are heard and that due weight is given, and that children are appropriately informed about the different family law proceedings that affect them. And that's so often what happens now. They're not included in the conversation, they're not told what is happening, or they're not told in a way that they potentially understand and are able to comprehend, and that needs to change. The principles will encourage, as I mentioned, and facilitate insofar as possible resolutions of dispute in alternative resolution methods, so again mediation, and that's something that we need to make sure is front and centre. It's the intention that the family law court and the proceedings, including the childcare proceedings, they'll be in a different building, they'll be in a different room, they'll be heard at different times to other types of proceedings, again, to separate it out and to acknowledge that this can be a very difficult and complex situation for families, and we need to make it as easy and as easy as possible as we can for them. The drafting of this bill is at an advanced stage. I would say there's one or two little things that we're just finalising at the moment, and the intention is that we will bring it to Cabinet and that we will publish it in the coming weeks. As part of that then as well, work began around the same time as the development of this bill on the Family Justice Oversight Group. And the intention of this group was separate to the actual physical structure, the infrastructure of the court and the judiciary, actually putting in place the ancillary supports, the types of other supports that would be required and necessary to support families, to support children as they go through this difficult process. And again, my intention is that this strategy will drive, that it will coordinate and the overall modernisation of the family justice system, and I'm pleased to say that that is also at an advanced stage, and when we publish the bill we'll be publishing this strategy at the same time, because the two go hand in hand. It will set out actions, it will assign responsibility, and it will set out timelines as to when this is to be delivered. What's really important as well about this strategy is that it complements other strategies that we have worked on, and as you've mentioned, Tanya, the Zero Tolerance Plan, which was our domestic violence strategy launched in June of this year, for the first time, I believe, places a much greater emphasis on children. Children as victims of domestic violence, but also children as witnesses to situations within a family setting or otherwise, who need to be supported, whose voices need to be listened to as well. So the strategy itself will focus on developing policies specific to and catering for young people going through what can be a very traumatic criminal justice process, but also acknowledging that two systems can be happening in parallel. So you might have childcare proceedings, you might have something happening in the civil court while something separate is happening in the criminal court, and we need to make sure that the voice of the child, what is happening to the child and the needs of the child are understood in every single situation, particularly where there are those parallels happening. So it's really important that any strategy, whether it's in my own department or others, that they all work in parallel. I know that many of you here, and indeed those who are watching online, because a lot of this is online as well, you made submissions to the family justice strategy and the work over the past year or year and a half. You gave your time to participate in the different advisory groups that were happening, and I just want to say how grateful I am, and I know my team are, for your input, but also many of you who also completed the online survey about your own experiences within the current system, and your views on what it should look like into the future. Again, everything that we do must be shaped by people's experiences and views, and in this instance, to have the voice of the child and to have those views has been absolutely instrumental in making sure that the strategy that we develop, the physical infrastructure that we develop and how it works, that it works, and as I've said, that it's user friendly. I think, as reflected in many of the contributions made even today in the conference, it's vital, as I said, that we don't just listen, but that we hear, that we acknowledge, that we reflect on what has been said to us by children. And so in particular, I'm really grateful to the young people and the children who participated in what was a bespoke children's consultation process. And I know it wasn't an easy process to get up and running, still in the midst of COVID, and we had to work around the restrictions, but in particular to the participation unit in the Department of Children and in my own team in the Department of Justice, and then the various different youth and family support organisations, just again to acknowledge their support and help and input into making sure that we could get those views and that it could feed into our overall process. Maybe just to touch on, and I think a lot of it links in with what was said here today as well, children and young people told us that they want more information on both the legal process and the family situation, so that they themselves might have the opportunity to be more involved in the decisions that affect them. So that couldn't be clearer, it couldn't be any more straightforward. In short, they want to be listened to and they want to have their say. A number of similar issues, again, as I said, raised today, the need for the system to have a greater focus on children, and I think we are doing that even by hosting this very conference, but by making sure that any of these new policies have a children's focus. The ability to access support services, so it's not just parents and adults that need access to these supports, children and young people as well, better training, information dissemination and awareness raising. And just maybe to pick up on that one point in particular around the training, I think that's something that comes up time and time again, that no matter who you are, be it the judiciary, member of the legal profession, that people have proper training, a better understanding, a better knowledge of how to engage with young people, because it is different, and we have to acknowledge that young people experience things differently, particularly when we were talking about smaller children as well. As discussed in the preceding panel, the rights and best interests of the child must be forefront to any decision that we're making concerning parental separation. It can be no doubt that this is a stressful time for parents, but again, we have to acknowledge that this is as stressful for children, and it's something that is often overlooked. So really, I just want to thank you for inviting me to close today's event, for being part of this. Thank you to all of our speakers, some of whom I know have travelled quite a great distance to be here, and indeed those who have joined online as well. It is only with your dedication, with your commitment to ensuring that the rights of the child, the voice of the child, is front and centre in absolutely everything that we do, that we will implement, that we will develop new policies, new laws that work for children, that improve the lives of children, and really that's what this is all about. How can we make sure that the laws and the policies that we develop are there to support and to help children? And going back to, I suppose, the Council of Europe and our President's words about the Council of Europe being the conscience of Europe, and how we need to make sure that we don't just see this as something to do, but as an obligation that we must fulfil. And I think by every one of us being here in this room today that we're absolutely committed to doing just that. So again, I want to thank my colleague Minister O'Gorman, who obviously has been front and centre in ensuring that this happened today, but also his work as Minister for Children in making sure that we develop policies and laws that help to ensure a safe and secure place for our young people. So again, thank you very much, Tanya. Thank you for all of your work in this space, and thank you for your attention. Thanks.
I'll let you come in. I'll wrap up if you want to. Yeah. Minister, thanks so much for closing the event today. I think you can see we have a full house. People were waiting to hear what you had to say, and I think people aren't disappointed. It's really clear from your input, your own personal commitment to the voice of the child and the rights of children, and that's really flowed through all the initiatives that you'd led in your department. And I think people would appreciate the detail of the work that you've done from a consultation point of view on the family law reform, and also the principles and proposals coming forward. I think it'll be of huge assistance to the group of experts, and they do their work tomorrow and on Wednesday around what's best for Europe, for children and young people. So thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm just going to wrap up the conference event now and give you an opportunity to get away. Look, I want to say a big thank you to all our speakers and chairs for their contribution today, and also a big thank you for everyone joining us online. A big thank you to the interpreters as well. I know some of us speak very fast, including me, so I'm sure you'll be delighted that today is over. I want to thank the team in the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, and the Department of Justice for creating today's event, and the Council of Europe, and in particular in the Department of Children to Emer O'Brien, Deirdre Reedy and David Lennon for all their work and organisation. When the conference programme came to me, I could see the amount of work involved in putting that together. There's weeks and weeks of work. Events like this don't just come off the way they have, so just a big thank you to you for all the work that you put in. So in terms of then some housekeeping, if you have a device that you use for translation, if you could leave that with reception on the way out. And just in terms of how you get out of here, I have a few closing remarks to say myself just at the end, but just the important bit in returning to your hotel, there is a bus that will bring you to your hotel at 6 o'clock. There's also a few spaces in the bus if you want, if you're not part of the delegation staying in the Hendricks Hotel, you'll be able to take that bus as well. And there's also a bus at 6:45 then from your hotel that will take you to Collins Barracks, where the conference dinner is taking place this evening. So 6 o'clock if you're leaving now by that bus, and 6:45 from your hotel to the conference venue. Your hotel is pretty close to the conference venue anyway. It's not too much of a walk. So just in my closing remarks, and I really want to direct these to the experts we're meeting tomorrow and on Wednesday on the recommendation that you're going to make around the best interests of the child and children's rights on public and private law proceedings. I think one of the key things coming through from today is the importance of making sure the dignity and the rights of the child are at the forefront of your recommendation. But I think it's pretty clear as well that the best interest principle and defining it in guidelines is going to be very important if we're going to get it right. But the other thing coming through for me today, and we were all very affected by the input of LEM and the Youth Council from EPIC. And I just hope we can translate that into change, because Ireland is actually one of the leaders when it comes to child and youth participation. But I think one of the things we have to reach is translating that intention into hard rights for young people. So I was really struck by Catherine Gent's input, particularly around the voice of the child and those family law proceedings that are high conflict situations. Maybe those children need a full guardian ad litem appointed in their interests when those situations happen. Because I know in the Children's Rights Alliance, our experience is those children are the ones that fall through the cracks, and they're very difficult for the services and for the courts to resolve. That would seem like an obvious solution. But I think the other thing coming through for you as well that's important is to who funds these services. And it needs to be government, because if you rely on parents to fund those services, you know, low-income families always lose out. So rights can't be about, rights are great in theory and practice if your parents can afford them. The state has to provide those services as well. Another thing coming through, I think, was resourcing. And resourcing at all levels. So having enough social workers, having enough judges, having enough services that are supporting all the professionals that are trying to do the right thing for children and young people in the services, as well as making sure that information is provided in multiple ways for children and young people so they can participate in the legal system on an equal basis, making sure they have legal representation as well where it's appropriate and in defence of their rights. And I think the other piece coming through as well was that the services are there. Those prevention, early intervention services are funded and available. That makes an enormous difference for families interacting with the care system and for children and young people themselves. It was said today, poverty should not be the reason why a child ends up in the care system. And I think that's something that you have to take through. The other thing that stuck with me as well was delay is corrosive. And you hear this in all circumstances in the justice system, and that's something that I hope you can deal with in your recommendations. And the final thing I think that really came through from our session this afternoon was the emotional well-being of children and how important those ancillary services are for dealing with parents who are going through this very difficult event in their lives, but for children as well, the social and emotional services that need to be available to carry them through. So there are just some reflections for myself from today. It was a wonderful reservoir of information and thinkings and recommendations. A boot camp for some people as well. I think a really excellent boot camp for many. And I want to really just thank everyone for all their contributions and making today possible. I really enjoyed it. It was a great event, and I think everyone should be really proud of what they did today. Thank you very much.